Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you for coming to this Food for Thought and University Lecture Committee event. I'm Linda Snetzelaar, and I am the Associate Provost of Outreach and Engagement in our Provost's office here at the University of Iowa. And a part of that role has included the work for a theme semester, and we'll be doing theme semesters each year for as long as we possibly can. And this year, we're focused on food, and we're calling the theme semester Food for Thought. And the lecture today will explore the future of food, so very much in keeping with our theme semester topic. I invite you to continue having conversations about food and participating in other food-related activities during the spring. We have a total this semester of about 132 different activities on this campus, including all of the colleges across our campus, including many, many, many different disciplines. So we're very, very excited today to have our speaker and want to thank the University of Iowa Lecture Committee for co-sponsoring this event. And I feel very, very honored this afternoon to be able to introduce to you our guest, Dr. Vandana Shiva. She is trained as a scientist and received her PhD from the University of Western Ontario. Dr. Shiva is a scholar, an author, an activist, and a Nobel Prize nominee. There will be question and answers and a session that will allow that just following her presentation. And then I also want to welcome you to an evening session at the Englert tonight at 7:30. The topic will be ecofeminism, and all of you are welcome. It's free and open to the public. And I would ask you now to silence your phones and welcome Dr. Shiva.
Thank you very much, and thank you for waiting patiently. I've been waiting patiently for 5 hours at the airport at Troy. They said there was a fog here with 1/16 of a mile visibility. One wouldn't imagine just now, but so they had us sitting there. Anyway, I'm here. And of course, my main lecture is this evening, but just some opening remarks so we can then have a conversation and have a dialogue. In my early days, when I slept and dreamt physics and the psi function and quanta, I really did believe you can do without food. I used to make kettlefuls of lapsang souchong tea and work on my PhD thesis, and off and on go eat a sandwich or something. It was really through the disasters of 1984, which in India were very Orwellian. Orwell's 1984 is about doublespeak. And in the year 1984, in June, we had the military being sent into Punjab. Punjab is a very prosperous part of India. The state is literally named after 5 rivers. Panj is 5, Ab is the waters. And this is where the chemical agriculture was introduced in the 60s with the name the Green Revolution. And the Green Revolution was even given a Nobel Prize. But in the 80s, within less than 2 decades, Punjab had become a land of war, of bloodshed. 30,000 people had been killed in extremism. It was the first contemporary extremism of our times. So, when you check bags these days, and if you haven't boarded the flight, they offload your bags, it's because of Punjab. Because one of the things that was done all the time was hijacking of aeroplanes, as well as the blowing up of an Air India flight going from Toronto to London, and the name was Kanishka, the plane's name was Kanishka, and it blew up over Ireland. So it was the early experience with extremist violence. And that same year, we had the violence in Bhopal, which is a city in the heart of India, which means the good land, actually. That's what the city's name is. And on 2nd December 1984, in the middle of the night, a cold winter night, the pesticide plant owned by Union Carbide leaked. And just the poison gas just went through, killing people. 3,000 people died. The funeral pyres were as big as this building. And children are still being born crippled. So between Bhopal and what was happening in Punjab, I just said, this is supposed to be about peace, but there's so much violence. Why is this agriculture violent? I was at that point doing a major program for the United Nations University on conflicts over resources. And I told the university there's something going on here. And I'd like to look at these conflicts in the deeper roots and understand them, because as is happening so often in our times, what are really issues of economic justice or sustainability, or now even increasingly climate change, are reduced to issues of religious conflict. And we are seeing exactly that happen right now with Syria and Nigeria with Boko Haram. I'm just preparing a new report, which will be released at the Expo in Milan. This year's Expo is dedicated to food. Its theme is Feeding the World. And I'll be releasing this manifesto on the land. And one of the people who was on our team was the Secretary General of a UN treaty on desertification and land degradation. And in the discussions, all this came out, that there was nothing like Boko Haram till 2009. And if you map the growth of the violence in these regions, it's 1-to-1 in terms of the shrinkage of Lake Chad. Just as much as the violence in Punjab was related to the destruction of the soil fertility, overexploitation of water, and of course a problem that farmers face everywhere, including in this country. I was looking at data that something like already about half the farmland here has to be leased back by the original farmers because they were pushed into debt. And then the banks and investment firms own the land, and family farmers have to rent it back to do farming. And this is happening everywhere. So it's basically 1984 that forced me to look at what was going on in agriculture. And I learned 3 lessons in that period. First, that the calculation of productivity is really all wrong. Because instead of looking at all the outputs of an ecosystem, including all the diverse production, so if a typical family farm in this area would have had animals and some grain and diversified grain production, today it's monocultures of corn and soy. That's it. And when you measure only a commodity in a monoculture, of course you'll have more of that commodity. But more commodity is in fact going hand in hand with less food. 90% of the corn and soya of the world is going for biofuel and animal feed. This is no more a food system. And I think that's the first issue when we reflect on food, that somewhere along the way we lost food. The second thing I learned in that period was that it wasn't an accident that there was so much violence linked to this system, because all the tools of industrial agriculture came from war. The chemical fertilizers were made in the same factories that made explosives. The same person, Haber-Bosch process, Haber did the poison gas, he'd do the explosives, and he did the fertilizers. They were the same group of scientists who worked on the gases for the gas chambers in the concentration camps. And for those of you who've read the story of Auschwitz, where all Jews would be brought in, as long as they could work, they built these factories which would then gas them. And there was a whole Nuremberg trial on this issue. Not only were the tools of war, the mindset was a militarized mindset. And that's what I've written in my book, The Violence of the Green Revolution, which was published at that time for the United Nations and has been republished many times since. And the more I stayed with agriculture, the more I started to appreciate sustainability in farming and committed myself to engaging in an agriculture for peace. And part of me, I can't live with unexplained questions, which is why when the Green Revolution of Punjab was leading to violence, I had to say, what's going on? Something's going on. But I also can't live with just theoretical investigations. As an academic, you're supposed to do that. I've never, for me, scientific inquiry is about to figure out more about the world and then act in it with responsibility and full knowledge. And so I made a commitment to promote sustainable agriculture. And because I got so involved in agriculture, I started to get invited to meetings, and I'd go because I wanted to learn more. And one of these meetings was the meeting that changed my life. It was where the old chemical industry, which was the war chemical industry, was now saying we got to own the seed. 1987, they weren't saying we got to feed the world. They were just saying we got to own the seed. The only way we can own the seed is through genetic modification, because now we can claim we've made something new. Now we can take a patent, and through patents we can own it. And in any case, the US and Europe are very small markets. So we have to go global with patented seed. And that's why we must have an intellectual property rights treaty in the free trade agreement, which became WTO. That's the day I decided I'd save seeds. So now we've saved seeds. I started a movement called Navdanya. We've saved 3,000 varieties of rice. Right now on our farm, we have about 200 varieties of wheat growing. Most of them don't contribute to gluten allergies. Monsanto even patented an old Indian wheat because of its properties of not leading to gluten allergy that so many people in the West are getting. And now, of course, I'm so passionate about food. I'm passionate about good food, real food. I'm equally passionate about stopping poison in our food systems. And for too long have we had stories about poisons being good for us. Remember, there was these ads that used to say, DDT is good for me. And Monsanto had to be hauled up by the Attorney General of New York because of advertising saying glyphosate is as safe as table salt. I won't go into details on this because I'm sure you have some questions. But with all of these years, and now it's 30 years of a life dedicated to good food and sustainability, and a deep reflection on it. I've written so many books. There's a new reader out from Kentucky University Press on all my writings on food, because, I have a chapter on food and agriculture and water wars. I have a chapter in staying alive. I have another chapter scattered all over. So they brought it together into one volume. It's available. There's a new book out on the role of women in seed and food, just released on the 8th of March in India, and it should be available in the next few months in this country. For the expo, besides this land manifesto, we call it, in Italy they still love that word. I've been asked to write a book for the expo on who feeds the world. Because we've been given a narrative that without chemicals we won't have food. Nothing could be further from the truth. We've been made to believe that large farms is where most production happens. Only 30% of the food we eat comes from large industrial farms, because most of it is commodities. Commodities go for animal feed, biofuel. They aren't feeding people. It's a highly wasteful agriculture. And that to me, I mean, I started because of sustainability. I saw the fertile land of Punjab destroyed. But now I'm seeing the planet destroyed. One of the stories about the industrial model is it uses less land. Now, it's ecologically so wasteful that it must constantly expand. A monoculture uses more land than that same land with diversity. So in fact, when you intensify with biodiversity and you intensify ecologically, you shrink the acreage and increase the output, and you increase the nutrition, and you increase the health benefits. So the figures are 30% of the food system that we have today is giving you 75% of ecological destruction. If you want to discuss that, we can discuss it more. And you just have to extrapolate. If 30 is giving you 75% destruction, how far have you to go? 45? You'll have a dead planet. So there are three reasons we can't continue on this path. The first is it will destroy the planet. The second is it is destroying society. When I wrote my book on the Green Revolution, around the same time, a book I read much later, which was called Harvest of Rage, and it was on trying to understand the Oklahoma bombing. And the interesting thing is, the Oklahoma bombing was with fertilizer bombs. And it was these militias that had got created because of the anger of the rural communities feeling abandoned. And I realized, while in Punjab, it went one way. In Oklahoma, it went another way, but it was all sort of seeds of violence. But you can't have society with no one on the land. And we are dismembering our agrarian communities. We are destroying our rural infrastructure. And when I say infrastructure, I just don't mean the little town and a little coffee shop. I mean the infrastructure of soil, which needs people to take care of it, or water, or biodiversity, or hedges, or the climate. Climate solutions are in the soil. So that's the second reason. And the third reason is it has so messed up our health that if we go down this path a little longer, you won't see healthy societies. And the sad thing is this country, which is the most advanced, is also the most advanced in food-related diseases. Yeah. And I've been coming here for 40 years. And I came to Canada to do a PhD. But over time, I haven't been able to eat the kind of food that's served in, airports or airlines or restaurants, unless it's an organic place. The food has become inedible. We have a beautiful word for it. It's abhaksha, unworthy of eating. So I would wrap up my opening remarks by saying that what we've managed to do with the wrong application of intelligence, it's hugely intelligent. I mean, it's intelligent to create a poison, but its intention is to kill. That's not smart. Yesterday night, I wanted to make tea in my hotel room. I opened this thing, and it had everything that doesn't belong to milk. It had corn syrup and soya powder and 10 chemicals, and I put it down. I said, I'll do without tea. So much of fake food. But you can cheat the consumer. You can't cheat the cells in our body. And that's why the disease epidemic. So food for thought really is, it's the well-being of the earth, it's our well-being, and it's our well-being of communities and societies. And all of it is tied together with a farming that is a farming of care, which, contrary to the thinking, actually gives us more food and better food. And the system where we say we're getting more food is not providing enough, and what it's providing is really unfit for eating. I would just say food has become anti-food. So if there are questions, remarks, you'll moderate. Well, that's what I've been doing since the time of Bhopal. This is what I've been doing, promoting organic. We've trained, our movement has trained more than 70,000 farmers in organic. I run a school now for ecological farming, agroecology. Farmers come all the time. Young people come from around the world. This is a conservation farm, which is a seed bank. It's a research farm. It's a training farm. It's a production farm. We eat the food from that farm. So if you want to find out more about it, go to the website of Navdanya, Navdanya, which basically means 9 seeds. It stands for diversity. I work with 5 states in India on a shift to organic. I'm on the national board of organic standards. I work with the government of Bhutan, which, as you know, decided to not measure GDP, the gross domestic product. They said, we're going to more measure gross national happiness and well-being of our people. And they actually have very sophisticated structure of what is the well-being of people. Their education is for well-being. Their school curricula is for well-being. Their planning commission is not called the planning commission, it's called the Happiness and Well-being Commission. And the Prime Minister, the last Prime Minister, wrote to me and said, I can't see us growing happiness if we don't grow organic. And will you help us? So we help them. And so yeah, it's very, very, it's a strong movement everywhere in the world. It's, in my view, the fastest growing movement.
I wonder, what role does Iowa play in the future of sustainable food and helping Iowans, straight-up Iowans and Iowa farmers do that help bring that sustainability about?
Well, I think my guess is these were the parts of this country that were anyway productive and fertile. And given that this is such fertile land, and I know there are people who are shifting to ecological agriculture. I've seen photographs of the drought and the GMO cornfield totally wiped out, and the organic cornfield doing fine. So I think even in this country, there's a need for a major transition. There's a need for a major transition because the non-sustainability of agriculture is hurting the land and it's hurting the rural communities. And I said it's hurting the health of people. You need far more biodiversity in your agriculture. So I would love to see the fertile lands of this area go beyond the corn, soya monocultures into diversity. And this is my vision that, they always say, oh, but we have big cities, so we must import from 5,000 miles away. No, if you have big cities, you just have a larger group of farmers around the city to grow healthy food for that city. We think of that in terms of water. When it comes to water, we do not say, I'm going to go all the way to Europe to bring my water, or to Argentina. We create local watersheds and make sure those watersheds are protected to ensure good water supply. We need to apply just the same logic to food and create food sheds. And it should be part of every institution's planning, it should be part of every city's planning to link to the rural areas and for each to help each other. So the cities and institutions like this start to help the farmers who are going under, and the farmers start to help the cities by getting healthy and good food. I would, of course, really like to see a change in the training of agriculture. The reason I started a school on our farm, and I call it the Earth University, is because the universities really only teach in agriculture how to apply chemicals. And we need much deeper knowledge about how systems work. And that's why agroecology as a system science is emerging. And we need that system science. And all this will only change when young people start making the demand to say, we need deeper knowledge. We need to know more about how pest-predator relationships work. We need to know more about the soil-food web. And that's how things will change. Yeah.
You talk about the destruction of the planet and the destruction of society, the destruction of human health. Isn't this essentially a moral problem at the root of all of this, that there is something about the values of our capitalist society that could enhance human well-being, and those values which diminish it, which really does, I think, at the root is a moral problem. How do we handle, how do we change people's values so that they're more eco-friendly?
Well, the first thing is that values have always been part of any society's decisions, of what tools to use, what systems to create. Those have always been value decisions. Even today, they are value decisions, but they're value decisions based on a singular value, the bottom line. And it's not an ethical value. It's, in fact, just like food has become anti-food, this is an anti-value value that erodes all other values. And I remember in the very early days of discussions on biosafety and the impact of GMOs on issues of environment, public health. And, there's an international law called the Cartagena Protocol. Most people in this country don't know because the US never signed it. And I remember a person saying, we cannot bring into this discussion ethics and other irrelevant considerations. So there is this thinking that ethics and values are irrelevant. Of course, nothing is value neutral. But values that are about sustainability, or values that are about the public good and the social good, or values that are about public health, those values are being pushed aside. And it is also a value question. But I think it's an issue of assessing the tools. The UN used to have, and this country used to have, offices of technology assessment, where we assess the tools. Today, the tools are being taken above human society and beyond value. And I have these debates all the time. Oh, but we have sophisticated, they never say tools, they always say technology because it makes it look sophisticated, but it's just, technology is a tool. And tools are assessed and evaluated. And I think that's a deep problem, because at the end of the day, all debates are supposed to be, we have a better technology. And yesterday when I was trying to have my tea and couldn't because of what was parading as milk and was not milk, and it was non-dairy creamer. And I said, here's a very, very complicated technology. They went through a lot of effort. Plastic and paper and then 30 fake ingredients. That's a hell of a lot of effort to create a fake product. So when all you assess is how much effort you put into it, and you want to be rewarded no matter what, in which case the cocaine guy should be rewarded hugely, they're making an effort to turn, it's made from poppy, right? I'm so ignorant about that word. Cocaine comes from poppy. Yeah? Poppy is such a beautiful flower. Poppy seeds are a wonderful food. We make poshto out of it. So the idea that, you know, I invested, I've made an effort, therefore my rights should be above society's rights. That's what's gone wrong in the last 20 years of free trade thinking and globalization. So it is definitely an issue of making values more visible, and then letting society participate in what are the values that should guide us. It's an issue of values, but it's an issue of democracy. It's an issue of participation. Can you keep your mic a little closer to you?
Address the issue of diets, because in my mind, the food problem, particularly the sort of lack of food problem, is directly connected to caloric inefficiencies due to animal products around the world. And in India now, India is the leading exporter of beef, and you see the violence recently attached to that. So India seems to be going in a sort of schizophrenic direction where it's heading towards organic on one side and then beef production on the other. And I also think that the white revolution caused a lot of damage to Indian agriculture and Indian forests, for example. So how do you square the increasing consumption of animal products in the world's diet with the masculine respect for agriculture?
Well, you know, as far as the Indian exports of beef are concerned, they're not coming from factory farms. They're coming from free-range animals. Whereas most of the meat production of the West is factory farms, very intensive factory farms. And what's the explanation behind that? Very, very simply, the subsidies that go into that system, the subsidies that go into animal feed. The day the subsidies for biofuel and animal feed are withdrawn, those factory farms will be unviable, because it makes no sense to feed animals 10 times more protein as grain to get 1 kilogram of protein as meat. And then you've got, as I said, a globalized system. Till globalization, till 20, 30 years ago, food was recognized to be distinctive culturally. You know, the Chinese ate Chinese food, Indians ate the 400 kinds of cuisine. I mean, every part of India is different. You travel 3 villages and the next village has a different kind of food. All of Africa, amazing foods. In the middle of the Sahara Desert, the baobab tree, every part of it gives you food. And they turn it into delicious dishes. What globalization did was basically make it all uniform. And then the McDonald's and the meat diets, everything started to spread. Not because people give up their food culture just like that, but they give it up with huge advertising. And advertising is a way of creating a sense of inferiority about who you are. You remember Macaulay. You know, Macaulay was a British person sent to India to say, how do we really colonize these people? You know, they're too prosperous, they've got too much, they have everything. And he said, yeah, they're too wealthy, they're much wealthier than we are. And the way to colonize India economically is make them believe that everything they have is inferior. And everything we bring, it could be junk, is superior. And the same is happening with the food system globally. And as Thomas Friedman wrote in The Lexus and the Olive Tree, behind every McDonald is a McDonnell Douglas. That so-called free trade has behind it the muscle of threat. And that's happening with the new trade treaties, the TTIP and the TPP, etc. So what explains people eating, giving up balanced, healthy diets that are appropriate to their land, their culture, even their physical system, for this diet that is making everyone sick everywhere, is really because there's so much money in that bad food system. And such a huge vested interest to spread it everywhere and turn every place into a market. And sadly, this is defined as free trade. That you don't have a right to say no. I know this because I had to deal with McDonald's and I had to deal with KFC. We shut down McDonald's for a few years and we shut down the KFC plants. And, we did all that, but it's the free trade rights. Coca-Cola had been thrown out of India in 1977 for not paying taxes. And India got a drink called 77 because 1977. With free trade, they came right back because now they have a right. Then my friends, the women, shut them down again in 4 villages. So this carries on. I mean, I think the big issue really is that it's not that people are making free choices with deep information in a totally democratic context. They're being given very biased information, huge advertising. In this country, the GMO labeling law, how has it been killed? $400 million spent on advertising. Now that kind of money will mislead people. Now, how many of people research what they eat? They look at the ad and the message that comes. It's all fine. So it's a serious issue, and on everything where we've gone down the wrong road, there's a huge reward for the. And if you look at the meat industry, it's 5 big players. Seed industry, 5 big players. Grain trading industry, 5 big players. Processing industry, 5 big players. We are talking about a concentration we've never seen around the food system. And it's a global concentration. And that's why I always say this is an issue of food democracy and food freedom. It's not an issue of the 5 who want to push bad food having the absolute right to determine on our behalf what we'll eat and how it'll be grown.
I'd like to return to this issue of morality. It seems to me that the world right now is facing a battle that's happening largely in America. A battle of 2 moral systems. One to privatize everything, and one that recognizes the value of a strong public life. And this privatization, I think I'd be interested in your comments on, we have a food system, a government system, a media system. And, these systems in America, they pretend like there's no opposition, that business way of doing things is the right way, the corporate business way, I should say. And then there's no argument. There's a pamphlet online called One Party Plan that says that neoliberalism is a system that is governing everything across countries, even with different, they call them different systems, communism, capitalism, socialism, free market, mixed. But there's essentially seems to be this, like you were talking about, the bottom line. But they view that as a moral good, the ones who want to privatize everything. It occurs to me that this country and the world is like a whale that's being cut up for slaughter. And I'm interested if you have what you see as hope for democracy movements and how they can have a stronger effect.
Yeah. First, I want to say, when the 2008 Wall Street collapse happened, it was the young people of this country who gave us the magic formula of 1% and 99%. And now all the research and books are being written. It is so true. They had an intuition. They didn't do the calculations. Intuitively, they just came up with a number. All the books on inequality are showing it is the 1% and the 99%. Now, this 1% economy, which is based, as you say, on privatization, needs a privatizing state. Even while it says we should not have a state. For example, the issue of seed patenting. If there wasn't a state to impose intellectual property rights, everyone would be saving seeds. The Monsantos could scream to the end of the day to say, it's my patent, I own it, I made it, I created it. No one would listen. So they need two things from the state: the strong arm to police citizens, to take away the basic freedoms and liberties. And around food, this is now so obvious. And the second thing they need very seriously is public wealth. Like I said, this entire system of food would not work without food subsidies. Globally, in the OECD countries, it's $400 billion. And this has been India's debate in WTO from the beginning, saying, you said you'd remove subsidies and you asked us to open up the markets. So we've opened up our markets, and you still haven't removed your subsidies. So this system won't exist without a state and without public wealth. And that is then used to siphon upwards and basically say that the public has no rights to its own wealth and its own resources. So where do I find hope? I find hope in three places. I find hope in the absurdity of the assumptions. And anything that goes that absurd must beyond a point collapse on its own. Because every lasting system must have coherence. It must have a capacity to stand without force. It must have a capacity to be adopted freely by people. Then it becomes part of a social norm. But if you've got to have Supreme Court cases on Citizen United and that kind of decision constantly, then it's a very artificial system hanging with brute force. The second reason I have huge hope is the very big movements after, and I'm part of IFG, among the founding board members of the International Forum on Globalization. And when WTO was formed, we were all looking at free trade, and we said, there's a lot of false claims here, so we will come together as a group to monitor what goes on with globalization. And we decided, when the WTO's ministerial came to the US in Seattle, we decided to organize, and the ministerial was stopped. People, when they are coordinated, when they're not just protesting, but they're protesting with information, knowledge, and an alternative, we have again and again and again brought unjust systems to a halt. But the third reason I have real hope is because right now the biggest grab is around the food system. The seeds that go into the food, the land that allows us to grow food, that's where the big grab is happening. And that's where citizens can act. That no matter what a Monsanto plans, as long as we save seeds, we have seed freedom. And that's what I've done for 30 years. And we have stopped every nasty law. And of course, I follow Gandhi, and I follow Gandhi both in the idea of freedom, of Swaraj, of self-organization, in Swadeshi, the capacity to make, which is what this idea of food sheds is, but his ultimate, they've just had this March, 50th anniversary of the name of the place, and the civil rights movement here grew as much out of the principles that Gandhi had laid out and worked with for our freedom, which is the principles of not cooperating with unjust and brute law. Law designed to make racism legal, law designed to make sexism legal and violence against women legal. All of those laws need our best mobilization to say, no, we obey higher laws. And our higher laws come from our deeper humanity. And they come from Gaia, this beautiful earth. of which we are a part. And those laws have power and they have force. And to the extent we live our lives according to them, we create the alternatives that will have resilience over time. And so, one of the things I do is seed saving, but the other thing I do is create gardens of hope. And whenever people say, oh, but it's so small and these guys are so big. Well, the British Empire was so big, they said the sun never sets on the British Empire because they controlled 85% of this planet. And where are they now? They can barely hold themselves together. Scotland wants to go this way, Wales wants to go that way. It's the small actions that millions can take that are the powerful actions in our times. So we must not underestimate our capacity to shape the food systems, because we are what we eat. We need to become more conscious about how what we eat was grown. We need to become, just like I was a reluctant. I entered the food world with reluctance. But now I spent 30 years saying there's nothing more important. I gave up my career in academics for these passions. And I think all of us need to respect ourselves, this beautiful planet, each other, and in one way or the other, just go back today and say, no matter how small, I'm going to do something to change the food system and make a change in the food that I eat. And it's through these mutual relationships. Because, we live in a world of interconnection, not in a world of isolation. So everything you do has trigger effects. And that trigger effect then multiplies.
Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. We're out of time, but let's thank Dr. Shiva for
Thank you. I hope to see you tonight.